All right, so here's some unexpected good news from the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court upholds a gun control law intended to protect domestic violence victims. Which, I'm sorry, what? I mean, granted, it's the right decision. However, considering these people are serious gun nuts, I mean, they just overturned a ban on bump stocks because, making semi-automatics into machine guns sounds like what could possibly go wrong. Even though we already know what can go wrong. So, I have to admit, this surprised me when I heard about it. And actually, the math, who was for and who was against the decision, surprised me as well. I figured that it might have been a split decision because there are a couple of justices who aren't completely off their rocker. But let me just get to the article. The Supreme Court on Friday upheld a federal gun control law that is intended to protect victims of domestic abuse. In their first Second Amendment case since they expanded gun rights in 2022, the bump stock wasn't considered that? Okay. The justices ruled 8-1 in favor of a 1994 ban on firearms for people under restraining orders to stay away from their spouses or partners, which, in a sane world, you would think that would make sense, because we all know the statistics of domestic violence and women ending up dead. So, yeah, you would think this would be a no-brainer. But the Supreme Court, don't trust them, so I am very happily surprised. All right. The justices reversed a ruling from the Federal Appeals Court in New Orleans that had struck down the law. Because, some judges have upheld my lack of belief in humanity. Because, yeah. Chief Justice John Roberts, writing for the court, said the law uses common sense. Since when did you care about that? Okay. And applies, John Roberts is some of the more reasonable. And applies only after a judge determines that an individual poses a credible threat of physical violence. Yeah, because that's why restraining orders are issued. People don't just throw those out like candy. Actually, they might be a little too stringent in how they give them out, because some people can't get them and end up dead. Of course, some people do get them and still end up dead, but that's a different story. Justice Clarence Thomas, the author of the major 2022 Bruin ruling in a New York case, dissented. Of course he did. I figured it was going to be Thomas or Alito. Those two are just absolutely off their rocker. President Joe Biden, who has been critical of previous high court rulings on guns, abortion, and other hot-button issues, praised the outcome. Oh, yeah. He knows a good decision when he sees it. No one who has been abused should have to worry about their abuser getting a gun, Biden said in a statement. Absolutely. In a result of today's ruling, survivors of domestic violence and their families will still be able to count on critical protections, just as they have for the past 3 decades. Last week, the court overturned a Trump-era ban on bump stocks, the rapid-fire gun accessories used in the deadliest mass shooting in modern U.S. history. The court ruled that the Justice Department exceeded its authority in imposing that ban. I'm still not sure how they did that. Alright. Friday's case stemmed directly from the Supreme Court's Bruin decision in June 2022. A Texas man, Zachary Ramey, was accused of hitting his girlfriend during an argument in a parking lot and later threatened to shoot her. I can't imagine why they wouldn't give such a sweet, caring man, wouldn't give him a gun. Seriously, you threaten to shoot someone and you're surprised nobody will give you a gun? What is wrong with you? At arguments in November, some justices voiced concern that a ruling for Ramey could also jeopardize the background check system that the Biden administration said has stopped more than 75,000 gun sales in the past 25 years based on domestic violence protection orders. Which also surprises me that, they actually understand that gun regulation needs to be a thing. But, yeah, that surprised me. I mean, it's a good surprise, but the case has also been closely watched for its potential to affect cases in which other gun ownership laws have been called into question, including in the high-profile prosecution of Hunter Biden. Biden's son was convicted of lying on a form to buy a firearm while he was addicted to drugs. His lawyers have signaled they will appeal. Okay, how does it affect him? A decision to strike down the domestic violence gun law might have signaled the court's skepticism of the other laws as well. But Friday's decision did not suggest that the court would necessarily uphold those laws either. I'm confused. What are you talking about, article? Jesus Christ. How does that affect Biden? The justices could weigh in soon in one or more of those other cases. Many of the gun law cases grow out of the Bruin decision. That High Court ruling not only expanded Americans' gun rights under the Constitution, but also changed the way courts are supposed to evaluate restrictions on firearms. Roberts turned to history in his opinion. Since the founding, our nation's firearm laws have included provisions preventing individuals who threaten physical harm to others from misusing firearms, he wrote. Some courts have gone too far, Roberts wrote, in applying Bruin and other gun rights cases. These precedents were not meant to suggest a law trapped in amber, he wrote. Wait a minute. I thought you were an originalist, which means laws are trapped in amber. I'm confused. In dissent, Thomas wrote, the law strips an individual of his ability to possess firearms and ammunition without any due process. Without any due process? If someone's under a restraining order, that's due process, my dear. I mean, what exactly do you want? I mean, you can't have the gun taken away until he kills someone? Do you think that little of women? I mean, granted, I'm sure this happens in same-sex relationships as well. But, more often than not, it happens in straight relationships. And it's usually the man who's after the woman. So, exactly what due process are we talking about here? The government failed to produce any evidence that the law is consistent with the nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation, he wrote. What the fuck are you talking about? Historically, women were considered property, not human beings that shouldn't be shot. I fail to see what the hell you're talking about. Not a single historical regulation justifies the statute at issue, Thomas wrote. Ginny needs to threaten him with a gun, and maybe that'll change his mind. Seriously, what drugs are you on? 7 of the 9 justices wrote opinions in the gun case spanning 94 pages, mainly focused on the proper use of history in evaluating gun restrictions and other limitations on constitutional rights. Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote that Roberts' opinion permits a historical inquiry calibrated to reveal something useful and transferable to the present day, while the dissent would make the historical inquiry so exacting as to be useless. She was among the 3 liberal justices who dissented in the Bruen case. Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who was part of the Bruen majority, noted that the court probably will have many more cases about the reach of gun rights because Second Amendment jurisprudence is in its early innings. It was only in 2008 that the court declared for the first time that the Constitution protects an individual's right to keep and bear arms. Really? It's only 2008? It seems like forever ago that Scalia did that. Ramey's case reached the Supreme Court after prosecutors appealed a ruling that threw out his conviction for possessing guns while subject to a restraining order. Ramey was involved in 5 shootings over 2 months in and around Arlington, Texas, U.S. Circuit Judge Corey Wilson noted. When police identified Ramey as a suspect in the shootings and showed up at his home with a search warrant, he admitted having guns in the house and being subjected to a domestic violence restraining order that prohibited gun possession, Wilson wrote. I'm sorry, tell me again, Thomas, how this is not due process? Idiot. But even though Ramey was hardly a model citizen, Wilson wrote, the law at issue could not be justified by looking to history. That's the test Justice Thomas laid out in his opinion for the court in Bruen. Jesus Christ. Again, at the time, women were property, and nobody gave a flying fuck what men did with their property. You could beat her senseless, you could rape her, you could kill her. Nobody gave a damn. So tell me again how this has any bearing on the law now that we kind of frown on domestic violence, because some people think women shouldn't have the snot beaten out of them or be murdered simply because their spouse is unhinged or that their significant other is unhinged. I mean, seriously, what the hell? The appeals court initially upheld the conviction under a balancing test that included whether the restriction enhances public safety. But the panel reversed course after Bruen. At least one district court has upheld the law since the Bruen decision. After the ruling, Attorney General Merrick Garland said the Justice Department will continue to enforce this important statute, which for nearly 30 years has helped to protect victims and survivors of domestic violence from their abusers. As the Justice Department argued, and as the court reaffirmed today, that common sense prohibition is entirely consistent with the court's precedent and the text and the history of the Second Amendment, Garland said in a statement. Advocates for domestic violence victims and gun control groups had called on the court to uphold the law. Firearms are the most common weapon used in homicides of spouses, intimate partners, children, or relatives in recent years, according to data from the Federal Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Guns were used in more than half, 57%, of those killed in 2020, a year that saw an overall increase in domestic violence during the coronavirus pandemic. 70 women a month, on average, are shot and killed by intimate partners, according to the gun control group Everytown for Gun Safety. Gun rights groups backed Ramey, arguing that the appeals court got it right when it looked at American history and found no restriction close enough to justify the gun ban. Right, because, it's just, if a woman ends up getting killed or just maimed, that's not important. It's not like it happened to a man. I mean, then we would have problems, but just a woman? Oh, well, we should go back to the time when women were property, which, I'm sure Clarence Thomas would love to overrule things like, I don't know, a woman's right to vote. I'm sure he would love to have Congress overturn that amendment. Because, it's an amendment now, so by definition, it can't be unconstitutional. I'm sure that that's what these people are thinking, because what the hell? And like I said, I'm sure there are men that could benefit from this too, whether it be same-sex relationships or women who are seriously unhinged, because it's not just men who partake in domestic violence. There are women who do that too. It's not mentioned as much because men basically are afraid to, because they would be seen as, wusses or something, because, they're supposed to have the power dynamic or something. So, I just cannot see why people are against this law, except for the fact that they want to go back to a time when women were property and men could do whatever the hell they wanted to, including killing the woman, because some reason. I don't think they even needed one. I mean, property. Like what Kristi Noem did to her puppy. Well, it should be perfectly fine because it's a farm, it's my property, it's all good. It's that kind of thinking. So, I believe that is all I have for this article. There's been a lot of unanimous, or in this case, near unanimous decisions that actually make sense, that I am really, really worried about when the other shoe is going to drop. We still have the Trump immunity case, and I don't know what other big decisions we're waiting on. But this concerns me. But hey, take a win where you can get it, right? So with that, I will see you guys in the next video.